Okay. So we're picking up the session from here. We've just done the settling practice. We've, um, let me spotlight myself. So we're picking up the session from here. We've just done a settling practice. We've done a little bit of kind of conversation about each person's practice so far and what's standing out in a sweet way, in a sour way, in a curious way. And we'll just quickly go through a few bits of information here, a lot of which we've already covered. The kind of title or subtitle of this session is listening for a clear, quiet voice. And that is a direction. And we talked about this a little bit in the settling practice of finding that stillness. And our breath is one way that we can find it, not the only way, as we've just discussed. But as we find it, we can start to pay attention in a little bit more sensitive way to what's going on. There's a big benefit there to us, and we can get clarity on things a little more easily, such as one clarity would be what's a direction that I can go to settle even more, to find even more ease? Or another way that we could go is what what can I see a little bit more with a little bit clearer eyes about my current experience? And we'll talk about those two things in a minute. So I won't go through reading all of these, but last session in particular, we did it a little bit the session before, but last session, we talked about kind of the movement through different stages of practice. Um, First, starting with we're kind of efforting a little bit, and there's this kind of rise of energy, which is traditionally called piti. And there's also this kind of pleasantness that can arise once we feel a little more settled, but it still kind of is requiring effort. And if we give that enough time, and probably today we won't have enough time to practice into settling even further, but if we give that a little more time, we start to not need the effort quite as much, and the effort starts to fall away. And you might even think of that as a flow state. So the effort falls away, but there's still this energy, kind of an excitement of doing this. And there's still a sweetness to doing it. It just feels good, feels right. And then that kind of extra burst of energy falls away, and it's just the sweetness and settledness. It becomes even more still and quiet. And there's a really beautiful metaphor. Actually, the metaphors are coming, but there's a metaphor of just being like a lotus root in a pond that's just soaked in this sweet, mellow, calm, tranquil energy that we're feeling. Okay, PT Sukha, so this kind of energy, and then the kind of mellow happiness or sweetness or contentedness. Talked about some different metaphors. There's the lightning strike and the rain sinking into the ground slowly. We talked about this one, the moment of having this exciting, amazing bite of a fresh, juicy peach. I'm imagining this one's just like a little bit sour too. Um, and then the sweetness afterwards of like, that was just great. So the sense of contentedness. It's less energetic, more easeful. And the traditional metaphor used to kind of compare these two is one is like a spring that's welling up within. So you can think of this spring like a spring of energy. So it's a rising, and often that can be experienced as very pleasant. There are definitely exceptions to that, which we talked about in previous sessions. But often that feels energetic, exciting. Um, Sometimes it's in an intense form. It could be called like a rapture, um, but it's not. That makes it sound more dramatic than it needs to be. And then the other one, which is Sukha, which is just this sense of like this lake, this cool lake just filling up, this cool, placid, open lake. So one is very upward, and then Sukha, this pleasantness, is just very outward, contentedness. Then, as we settle in, kind of, I don't want to say get tired of, but the kind of energy and intensity kind of loses its pull on us. It's like, yeah, that's cool, but like even better is just to like sit here and just enjoy a nice rest and enjoy this added clarity. And so there's this additional peace, this equanimity that comes, um, this kind of connection with something that is unshakable, even when everything else is moving. And so you're experiencing maybe all of the movement, but you're more connected to this factor of equanimity or upekkha. We talked about these all being kind of faders. So rather than I have it or I don't have it, it's almost like as we meditate, we can feel these kind of going up and down. And through settling and practicing, we can kind of stabilize like, oh, I'm really bringing the energy up. Oh, the energy I'm going to take down a little bit. Okay, the ease is more here. That takes time. It's not necessarily conscious, but these things start to happen more consistently with time practicing. And as that happens, we get mentioned this metaphor. So this pond of lotuses. So you can imagine just being a lotus and being just soaked in this water. There's something in this metaphor that for me almost feels so there is a coolness which is really sweet. We can imagine like in this lotus pond, it might be kind of muddy, like a swamp, and it's kind of there's almost like a darkness and a non it's not like a super sharp feeling. So there's this kind of sweet openness, there's this coolness, there's this feeling of kind of just being soaked in this good feeling, but there's not the same level of like sharpness that is kind of considered like the height of a strong meditation practice. You want to also have that clarity. And so as one continues to settle, even that sweetness starts to fade a little bit. And there's another metaphor that's used to describe this moment in practice or this experience. I'll read this one out loud. Just as if a person were sitting covered from head to foot with a white cloth, so that no part of their body were left uncovered by the white cloth. So too, the meditator sits pervading this very body with a pure, bright mind, so that there is no part of the whole body that is not pervaded by the pure, bright mind. And there's two end quote exclamation or two end quotes there. And that's not an important part of the quote. You don't have to remember that. It's just a grammatical error that I made. So the pure white cloth, what's the deal with this? The imagination of this kind of pure white cloth or this pure bright mind, it's just a simile for the quality of mind, is that everywhere that the attention goes, things are clearly seen, or a term that's often used in the original text is there's clear comprehension, not because you're thinking about something or trying to extract every little part of it out. It's just that there's enough quietude of mind that you're just seeing things the way they are without extra concepts, ideas put on top of it. There's a lot of mental quietude and a lot of clarity and a lot of sharpness. Uh, Not a negative sharpness, a sweet sharpness, a good sharpness. This may or may not be territory that we'll get into today. But this is just, I mention these because this practice that we're doing, this orientation towards pleasure and ease and practice, this is kind of the trajectory. And there are things to just be curious about as I go along. Am I feeling some of these different factors? Am I feeling this energy? Am I feeling this sweetness? Sometimes maybe the energy fades away. Sometimes even that fades away, that sweetness that remains. And there's just clarity. Doesn't need to happen consistently. And it's not a way for us to measure whether we're doing a good or a bad job. We just allow these things to happen as they happen. And they are more likely to happen when we spend more time practicing, just because you give more time for your mind to settle. And I don't know about you all, but I definitely could use all the extra time for my mind to settle I could get. So this is the path that we're going to follow today. And we're going to add this last column all the way to the right. So we've worked with the counting, we've worked with following the breath and its kind of movement through the body. We've worked on the touching, which is noticing this one place that the breath is touching. And then the settling, which is where it gets a little interesting. And I mentioned before, this is not really a way of attending to the breath, or it kind of is, but it kind of isn't. In the settling, you stop paying attention to any particular part of the breath. You're not counting, you're not following the breath in and out, you're not noticing that one point. You're not doing anything in particular with your breath. You do know that you're breathing, so you're not like trying to forget that you're breathing or something like that. And you might have some vague sense of how long your breath is. It's okay, especially in this stage, if you start to lose a little bit of track of the length of breath. What you're doing here is just letting go. You're working the practice of letting go and opening your mind up to what might come next. So you're opening your mind up, especially to really this core experience of stillness or quiet or ease. As you drop in over the course of practice, there might be a growing sense. Sometimes there's not a growing sense. And so you might say, oh, I'm not going to spend a lot of time in the settling because my mind is still all busy. But as you drop in a little bit more, you make your way over to the settling and you just let your mind open up to what it's going to show you. And so there's actually a word that's used. Sometimes it's a controversial word in meditation circles, but the Pali word is unimportant. I'll use it here anyways, but the metaphor is more important. The Pali word is nimitta, which just means sign. And you can imagine yourself as you're meditating, especially at the beginning. You're like, in the ocean in the middle of the night, sailing. You don't really have an idea of where you are, and it's you're getting bumped around by the waves. And as you settle into your practice, you start to get a sense of your bearings. You start to find more ease in the practice, so the ride gets a little less bumpy, but you still don't know exactly where you are. And as you settle in enough, there's enough clarity to maybe start to see little signs that you're quieting down. And any sign will do. Sometimes people, as they quiet down, they notice like there's a light behind their eyes. Or sometimes it's just a, certain feeling. Like you could actually take just, this is not officially it, but sometimes what I do is I'll take the feeling of pleasure as the sign to just let that be the kind of center point of my attention. Sometimes as we quiet down, we notice there's like a ringing in our ears, or there's kind of a feeling of settledness in the body. So there's all sorts of things that can happen, and you just experiment with this. Just your sense that things are quieting down is what you can center. This is your lighthouse that you kind of are looking for a light from as you move along in the practice. And you just start to lean into that. That becomes your practice. What is my sign here that I'm quieting down? How do I know that I'm quieting down? Other ways to say this is, how does this feel calm or easing or pleasant? And you start to put that at the center of your attention more and more and let go of everything else. Seeing that we're late in time, I'll move somewhat fast through this last part. But I mentioned already there's really two skills or two ways that we want to work our mind in this practice. One, which we've been really leaning into a lot, which is the collectedness of mind, finding more ease, sweetness, peace in our experience. So we've been developing that at this stage, once we have a little bit more collectedness, we can keep going in that direction and find even more collectedness and sweetness and settledness. And that's very valuable, worthy pursuit. It's a very good skill to learn for the mind and just refreshing, feels good in our day to day life. And then there's also, we talked about this, seeing life a little bit more clearly. There are so many, and the word that many of us have heard for different reasons, it's become kind of part of the popular vernacular, is these would be like insight practices, or people sometimes use the traditional word of vipassana practices. Um, and so these kind of have their own orientation, and that would be a whole other session. But generally, I'll just speak at a very high level. Anytime that you're paying attention to really looking closely at what's going on where you're uncomfortable, not conceptually, but especially in a somatic way, or in an experiential way, we should say. Anytime you're looking at change that's happening, again, not conceptually, that's good too, but change that's going on somatically and experientially. So, like even noticing the sound of the bell fading would be an example of this. So, discomfort, change, and then anytime you're noticing elements of your experience that are not really within your control, that are happening all on their own. And ultimately, as we settle into this, we come to experience that our thoughts, our feelings, our behaviors, our conclusions, our beliefs all spontaneously arise also. And so that becomes its own trajectory. And so these three things, those discomfort or displeasure, and getting kind of to the experiential root of that, change that's always happening, and what we can call the kind of lens of life or the element of life that's not up to us or not self. And these are the three ways that as we settle our mind, we can direct it to work more in those ways. Okay, this one I'll speed through. It's not so important right now. So it is 23 minutes past the hour, and we haven't started meditation yet. So if you have a hard stop at the half hour mark, this would be probably a good time to depart. If you can stay for another, let's say 20, 25 minutes, then we'll start practice in just a moment, but maybe take a minute to stretch and you could stand up. Oh, just give our bodies a little reset since we've been sitting for a while. We still have everybody. That's great.
Sam, it's Marilyn.
Yes.
Um, I don't think I can stay 20 minutes, but I'm going to stay a little while and then just leave if that's okay. And then I'll
Yeah.
catch the recording and, you know, I'll go
Great.
through it. But I don't think I can stay that long to be.
Not a worry. Thanks for letting
Okay.
me know. Okay. So let the body become soft. Notice ways that you can become a little bit more comfortable as we're starting off. A little bit of ease to your body. Relaxing muscles such as the face, the tongue, the shoulders, the back, the hips. They all deserve rest. You deserve rest. Noticing your breath and starting a very slow, unhurried movement to increase the length and or depth of your breath. Breath increasing in length and depth. Start to find your longest comfortable breath. Again, comfortable, keyword. And if you haven't already, you can begin the longest of counting. If it's comfortable, attaching the numbers 1 through 9. If not, you can shorten that. Inhaling 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And exhaling back the same way. Just because your breath is long doesn't mean it has to be deep. you like, you can follow your breath even as you're counting. No matter how you're counting this 1 through 9, finding a pleasant way to do it. As if you're counting to a child. You're going to move across to the longest of following. So dropping the breath, just following the breath, dropping the count and following the breath from the tip of the nose to the base of the spine and back out. Letting it be this cool, gentle internal breeze. Mind may have a tendency to still keep counting. No need to struggle against that. Just relax into following. This whole thing be a play, an art, not an expression of doing it the right way with your mind. Make the practice your own. Transitioning over to just find a point over which your breath flows over and back between your lip and your nose. Just resting your mind there as if it can just post up and recline in that one spot in a rocking chair. So your mind is just on this one spot between your nose and your lip, and your breath flows over and back. Still, it's the longest that's comfortable. Where you notice tension, you can just let it go and just easily float in that one place. Letting go now, even of that one spot, and still breathing the longest comfortable breath. Allow your mind to open up wide. Begin to be open to what your experience might show you, in particular, about how you've settled. Really centering anything in your experience that's telling you that you're easing, settling, calming. If it wants to, you can allow your breath to shorten and take any length that it prefers. Doing what's intuitive here. You may fall off, just bringing yourself to any semblance of ease or settledness that you're dropping into or moving towards. If you're feeling really lost, you can always go back to touching your breath on that one spot. Shortening even further over the next few breaths, not immediately, and finding the shortest comfortable breath. And remember, play with depth and length. It doesn't have to be uncomfortable. Just being the shortest of settling. Short breath, but mind not particularly fixated on any one part of the breath. Turning to the shorter of touching. The shortest breath, but just moving over and back one spot between your nose and lips. Ease, comfort. And then the shortest of following the shortest breath in and out. And then the shortest of counting. One, 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 one. And the shorter of counting. One, two, three, three, two, one. Longer of counting. One, two, three, four, five, six, six, five, four, three, two. And then the longest of counting, the 9 count. Ready, you can return to normal breathing, but before you close your practice, reflecting on the last few minutes in practice. Where did you go? Relive that with your whole body and mind. What worked? What didn't really work? Why are you doing this? As you feel ready, drawing your practice to a formal close, deeper breaths and small movements. And close the recording. It's been a delight being with you all during this last 4 weeks. And hoping this has served you and continues to.
Thank you.